What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome back to the channel. I know all 12 of you that follow me have been anxiously awaiting another video. Well, here it is. So I've had this car now for a little over a year, and it's time for some upgrades. I'll show you what we got going on. So I am at, let's see, 2576. That's the odometer. I'm at 160 hours in just over a year. That being said, she's already had a hard life. I've got a little clip that I'll show you from another video I took with this thing up in the air. My control arm bushings on this thing, they're pretty much done. There's a lot of play, a lot of movement in it. So kind of been ignoring it for a little while. It's time to get her taken care of. So I've got new bushings, and I figure while we're in there doing the bushings, might as well install a gusset kit, because if you look closely, if you've got one of these cars, you've ever stuffed the front end into the sand or ground or whatever, that bulkhead, which is not much of a bumper, it's pretty flimsy. This has had its nose in the dirt a few times, and you can see how the bulkhead has kind of collapsed. So we're gonna go ahead and install the CT Worx gusset kit and their upgraded Durlin bushings on all the control arms. I also got the race plate, which will enable me to remove the lower control arms without tearing the whole front of the car apart. One of the reasons that I decided to go with theirs. I do have another bulkhead I may put on there, or I may straighten this one out. I don't know yet. Long term, the plan is to build my own front bumper / bulkhead for this. So for now, we'll just get the new bushings in and the upgraded gusset kit, and we'll go from there. So it has been a while since I posted a video. It's not because we haven't been doing any riding. I've actually made 3 trips, 2 dune trips, and just a local ride. I haven't done anything with the footage. It's a lot of work to post ride videos, so I figured might as well do another how-to video. It's been a while since I've done any kind of install videos, so that's what we're going to do today. Might as well take a difficult job and complicate it even more by filming it and editing a video about it. So here you go. Enjoy. So some of you may be asking yourself, why do I need a gusset kit? Well, maybe you don't. It all depends on how you drive, how you ride, and where you ride. I drive this thing pretty hard, and it shows. This is going to prevent me from doing any more significant damage to the frame of the car, which, if you're familiar with the X3, they're not strong. The reason they're so fast is because they're so lightweight, and the construction is very lightweight as well. So your driving characteristics and style and the terrain that you ride and how hard you ride is going to determine whether or not you need to do something like this. So I'm going to get this thing rolled in here, get it on my handy dandy motorcycle ATV lift, get it up in the air, and start tearing parts off of it. Stay tuned. Let's bring it in. Pretty well centered. I'd say that's the spot. Let's get her up in the air. In case you're wondering about this lift, it's got a removable plate normally for when you change a tire on a motorcycle, street bike. It just so happens to be in just the right spot, and I can change my oils, the engine oil and the transaxle, all at a nice comfortable working height. How about that? So now I'll cut to a few clips as to why I need a gusset kit and why I had to have the shocks rebuilt 2 months ago. As you can see here, this is our CT Worx bomb-proof gusset kit with race plate. There's your race plate. And of course their Durlin bushings. We'll be putting those in. Just unpackaged all this. Pretty impressed. Good quality stuff. The guys in Carolina know what they're doing. They also sent some stickers and a koozie and full color instructions with photos. I've already read through this. It's kind of a lot to wrap your head around at first, but I'll refer back to it from time to time because I'm sure I'll make a few mistakes here and there. Overall, looks like a pretty nice kit. So we got her in the air, secured, not going anywhere. For the instructions provided by CT Worx, I'm going to go ahead and start pulling the front grille and hood assembly off. Wheels and tires, shocks. There are some optional steps according to the instructions. I'm probably just going to make things simpler by getting as much off and out of the way as I can. I'm not going to bore you with step by step as I do this. This would be like a 4-part video if I did, so we'll cut to some time lapse. Any pertinent information to the disassembly or reassembly, I'll stop and I'll make sure that I cover that in detail if you're interested. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Definitely helps following the instructions though. It tells you exactly which fasteners to remove and which ones not to. So now that I've got that off, we'll go ahead and get the wheels and tires off. The next step in the instructions is getting the radiator out of the way. You don't have to completely disconnect the radiator, which is nice about this kit. I understand that some of the other gusset kits require that you do remove the coolant lines. This one does not, so I'll get some more stuff out of the way. Alright, so just wanted to clarify, the instructions talk about removing the 4 bolts that hold the radiator in. It's actually a little bit confusing because you do have 4 bolts that hold the radiator itself to the frame that the radiator bolts to. There's 2 more down there. Those aren't the ones you want to remove. You want to remove the ones that actually hold, which is your radiator support / electric fan assembly. And in the instructions from CT, neat little trick, screwdriver through the little hole in the top of the structure, goes through the upper shock tower brace, and it holds it up out of the way so you can remove the bulkhead. So that's next. Alright, so the bulkhead's out of the way. Next step is to remove the lower control arms. So instructions say these two bolts in the center of the front edge of the lower control arms need to come out. Those won't be reused, so we'll get those out. And then there is a nut on each of the rear lower control arms. Get those off, and then we pull this bolt and nut on the back side of it there to slide the ball joint out from the knuckle. That's next. So now the lower control arms are off. Next step is to remove the lower shock mount bolts, and then we're going to secure those up out of the way as long as supporting the upper control arm so we don't max out our CVs. I'll use a strap and go over the A-pillars as the instructions recommend. Alright, took me a little bit to figure out how I wanted to strap this, but I was able to use the same strap for the shock and support the the upper control arm at the same time. So now that that's done, the next step is to remove the sway bar link here, and then the rear nut that's holding the upper control arm. And then one last step, because this is a smart lock, there are special instructions for that because the differential itself is larger. I have to loosen all the mounting bolts for the differential. Get that moved out of the way so I can get the hardware out that needs to come out. And then that is it for disassembly. We'll start installing the Gusset kit. Alright, so here you can see, if you have a smart lock, you've got this electronic servo that actuates your differential, different than the non-smart lock models, and you cannot get the upper right side bolt out. The other side comes out no problem, there's nothing in the way. So this is why we have to unbolt the differential, slide it back, and get this bolt out. So as far as the bushing removal, pretty straightforward. Peel this wear sleeve off. Bushing and the center pin comes out, bushing on the other side. That's all there is to it. We'll get all these out and we'll put the new ones in. Alright, so we've got all the pieces for the control arm bushings cleaned up. Just a little comparison here. This is the OEM bushing. And you can see it's kind of got some flex to it. Whereas these Durlins from Worx are a much more rigid material. They advertised as self-lubricating, however they do put a spiral groove inside of it. You can still grease them just to push the mud and water out. It's hard to tell exactly where my stock ones have failed, but I'm not going to clean all these up to try and find out. I'll just throw the new ones in. So we've got the sleeves cleaned up. Those will go into the new bushings. And then the wear plates cleaned up, and the control arms are cleaned up. So we'll show you how we put these together. So here we've got our control arm all cleaned up, all the dirt and grease cleaned out of it. It's ready to assemble. I went ahead and slid one bushing onto the sleeve. It's the OEM sleeve. We'll just slide in one side, get it started, and then we'll drive that home with a dead blow hammer. Slide the other side in. Nice snug fit. I expect a lot better bushing tolerances with these. And then the wear sleeve just clips on over top of that. It's ready to go back in. So now you've seen how the lowers go together. The uppers are the exact same way. Got both lowers done. So now I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the rest of the stuff that I need to reuse. Go ahead and press those into the upper control arms, and then we'll get to installing the rest of the gusset kit. Alright, so here are the 4 bolts that we loosened up to manipulate the differential so that the top bolt for the front of the upper control arm can come out. So I'll loosen that up, use the pry bar to leverage it out of the way, and got that bolt out of there. So now the next step, according to the instructions, is to cut off these studs right here because they're tied together with the backing plate. So you either cut them off and then get the backing plate out of there, or remove the differential and you can pull those out intact. I'm going to go ahead and knock those off of there, and we'll pull it out. Alright, studs are out of the way, backing plate's out. Pretty straightforward. One optional step in this is cutting off these tabs. Actually, that's not a tab, it's the protrusion of the tube of the frame coming through the front. If you ever plan on installing boxed A-arms, especially the CT Raceworks ones, that is a requirement for those to clear. So I don't have that stuff right now, but who knows, one day I may fold up an A-arm and need to upgrade. So I'm going to go ahead and hack those little dudes off. Alright, those are cut off. Next step is to put in the race plate, which is just going to set in there probably from this side. And it'll line up with the holes in the frame. I don't know if you can see that, but it's in there. We're not going to put the 6 millimeter bolts in there just yet. That'll go on after the front gusset is in place. The next step is to put the A-arms on. Now for the rear mount of the lower control arms, the gusset that's included with the kit actually has to sit over the frame. The A-arms go into the gusset and then it slides on together. So this would be difficult to do by yourself. So I'm going to get a helper. I'm going to set this on time lapse and you can watch us struggle with this really, really fast. Alright, that wasn't too bad with an extra set of hands. Put the nuts on there just to keep things in place. Next is the front bulkhead and the gusset, front gusset, and the bulkhead / bumper. Alright, so I took a minute to kind of review the instructions and just kind of mock this all up to make sure that I had it assembled the way it needs to be. The photos in the instructions are kind of hard to decipher the OEM parts from the CT parts because it's all black. Anyway, this is what we've got. Rear upper gusset goes in. That bolts in with these 2 bolts through the holes in the factory frame. Pretty straightforward there. The gusset top plate, that bolts into the rear upper gusset plate for the A-arms. And then if you look inside here, there's 2 holes. They have 1 bolt through there right now. That's just going to hold this all together because I ran into an issue. If you're using your factory bulkhead, you can see it's got this little tab or this beveled edge that comes off. That's not going to sit flush with the front bulkhead and gusset. So I could just run the bolts in, tighten it down, and let it flatten itself out, but that's going to leave some nasty looking marks on the front of the bulkhead gusset. So I'm going to take it back off. Either going to flatten it out myself or just cut them off so that it sits flush. And then we can hang the upper A-arms in place and bolt everything together, tighten it all down. So now I imagine if you're running the CT Raceworks Moab, which is their mother of all bulkheads, that's going to utilize these 4 bolts you see there. I don't have that yet, so I'm using the factory one. I'm going to take this rolled edge off of here so it sits flush up against it once you put the bolts through the bulkhead. So you can see right here, I just took a hammer and I flattened this out. So now when you run the A-arm bolts through it, it actually sits flush with the bulkhead gusset. So if you don't mind beating on your bulkhead, that's how you make it fit flush. Otherwise, you buy their bulkhead. So now we'll go ahead and we'll hang the upper A-arms, get everything loosely bolted together, and as soon as I'm confident that everything's right, we'll tighten it all down. Alright, all the necessary hardware is in place. It wasn't without its struggles. It'd be hard to tell in the time lapse, but we struggled with this bolt right here. Gotta have the angle just right or it's gonna fight you. Have patience. An extra set of hands definitely helps to get everything lined up, but it's all loosely together now, so other than the shock and the sway bar on each side, and obviously the lower ball joint, but the bulk of it is together. So I'm going to go ahead and start running stuff down for final torque. All in all, not too bad of a project. If you like puzzles, you'll like this. It's all back together. Still dirty, needs a bath, but it's all back together. Grease the new bushings, torque the lug nuts. One thing I would recommend if you do this, if you pull your front sway bar up and out of the way, make sure you pull it back in the down position before you bolt your shocks on, otherwise you're taking your shocks loose again. Ask me how I know. So that's going to be it. We'll get this thing out on the trail. I don't expect to feel much of a difference other than the tight end, the front end being a little tighter for the new bushings. But just the peace of mind of knowing that this thing is a lot stronger than it was before. Send it harder. All in all, it was about a 6-hour job, basic hand tools. Definitely recommend having a helper for a few stages of it, but all in all, not too bad. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.